First, I'd like to ask Antoine on stage. He's the co-founder and CEO of FinChatBot. He's a French entrepreneur based in sunny Cape Town. He started a social music initiative called Recordbox Session that organizes music events and things like this. So far, the initiative has raised a bunch of money and helped local communities to build houses. So it's not just all about the money, which is beautiful, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Thanks for inviting me.
Next we have Uku Tammet. He is a product engineer at TransferWise. Anyone who's lived internationally has probably used TransferWise before. He's a university student who likes Java, Python, Node, Go, React, and creating web applications. And he likes to make cool things with cool people using cool tech. I think we can all relate to that. So third, we have a very recognizable face. Bernhard Hauser is going to come join us as well from Oratio. I think you know who he is. Then Victor Thoma will join us from ERGO Digital Ventures. This is really the insurance part of this, based in Germany, but also all across the DACH region. His role is to build fast pilots to identify new business opportunities for ERGO. So he's done this over the past few months and is going to share a little bit about that with us. And last but definitely not least, Mario from BeeOne. He is a native of Canada and or Croatia, we're not quite sure. And his last name is pronounced Brkic, and I love saying that. So Mario is at BeeOne, and he is here, or here in this building, so to say, to reshape the way we deal with money. And that is, to tell you the truth, probably the most diverse FinTech and Insurtech panel I've ever been on. This is really fun. Awesome, guys. Cool. To start us out, I have a kind of a general question. So in Germany and the DACH region, we're kind of seeing these kind of applications or companies emerging in the FinTech and Insurtech area, not so much in the United States. Is this a European phenomenon? Is this German or DACH phenomenon? I think I'm going to direct this first at our friend Victor.
Actually, I don't think it's a European phenomenon. Do I need to turn? Yeah. You have a lot of Insurtech companies as well in the US, and for example, if you look at Lemonade, which was a kind of big star from the US, also in terms of chatbots and for the insurance industry, which is like the golden star for a lot of insurance companies right now. You directly have an example that is not a typically European example, for example. And yeah.
But I remember you were running kind of an early prototype, right, in the German market. Like, how did that actually go? What were the results? What actually was the initial decision to do that?
The initial decision happened on the F8 conference of Facebook. We had a colleague there, and he came back and said, we definitely need to do a chatbot. And
so in 2016 then, right?
Yeah, in 2016, yeah. And we started playing around with ChatFuel, and then it got the attention of the internal departments, and they said, okay, it's great, we need it, can you enhance it? And then, yeah, we looked to different suppliers and analyzed huge companies, smaller companies, ended up with Rasa, and yeah, went live some weeks ago, and we are very happy. So.
Okay, so the first one was built with ChatFuel, right?
Yeah.
And as far as I know, the innovation team is based in Berlin as well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we got everything happening there.
Yeah, it's our task to work differently, and our task to deliver early prototypes, and ChatFuel was a perfect tool to show something quickly, and it helped to convince stakeholders. If you could, yeah, show it in Facebook Messenger that it works in somehow, although it was not ready for customers.
Do you all agree with the fact that this has nothing to do with the European phenomenon? We're just all kind of navel gazing, and we think that, yeah.
I'm from Africa.
Oh, fantastic!
FinChatBot is from Johannesburg, Cape Town. We're based in South Africa, and our first portfolio of clients is fully South African. So this is something the industry is looking at, and definitely across any country. It has a relevant impact so far.
For sure, I think this is also also the difference between FinTech and Insurtech per se. I mean, the FinTech is more I think maybe perhaps a global phenomenon as far as I can tell, even though most banking systems are integratable. For instance, the American system is not so easy to integrate with others, as far as I've understood, legally.
From my experience, I would say the European system is more complex than the US system because of the law. The law is much less flexible in Europe than in the US, and protecting the data of the customers is a big issue. The first portfolio of clients we have in South Africa are looking at the European law rather than they don't want the data hosted in the US for that perspective. They want the data hosted either in Europe or in Africa.
Because of the safety factor?
Yes.
So actually that brings me on to the hot topic, which is that in 2018 the data protection regulation that was passed in the EU is going to take effect. Obviously, you seem to have already kind of integrated that into the planning of which regulations to follow. Is that how you've all dealt with this? Has this been kind of a hot topic for the last 2 years, or have you just started, or how are you dealing with this? Do you want to maybe start, Mario?
So sure. So I think Antoine gave a nice introduction with the with the fact that we're all working in a very complex environment, especially in Europe, because of the legal situation. And there's one thing which is data privacy. That's something that's coming right now. So the General Data Protection Regulation starts in Europe on the 25th of May next year. And what this is basically making us think, it just makes everybody think a bit more about getting the consent of customers for using the data that we need to be able to provide any chatbot services or anything else. So you need data as an input to be able to build the services in a proper way. And the easiest way that I explain it to people is, right now you have like the small cookie acceptance things on web pages. Well, now this is going to the next step where you're going to have to, instead of just say I accept cookies, you're going to have to, as a website and service, say I also use this data, I'm going to use it for these purposes. And you can't just have a checkbox and say it's already fulfilled.
So it's opt-in, right? Yeah. So it's changed. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that it's a European regulation, but nobody takes it outside of Europe. Maybe takes it as seriously. But the regulation is first, it doesn't need to be accepted into law in each country. It's just on the 25th of May, Europe-wide. And second thing, it is regulating that anybody that's dealing with European customers, which in an online world means everyone. So a Japanese company that has somebody from Europe sign up for their services needs to follow data protection regulation, which is then making it massively more complex. And as we've discussed, the fines are astronomical. So it goes from like 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover, which I think is a big enough deterrent for everybody. But even without data protection, this specific regulation, I think in Europe the situation is complex enough, and the data protection situation in some countries is at such of a level that that's why we're spending so much time looking at what is the right approach to this, to the topic of chatbots. How can we do it and be compliant with all this regulation that's in this industry that's really specific because of obvious reasons.
One good thing about this that I'd like to point out, though, is that this regulation, as Mario put it, is Europe-wide, which is actually quite useful because, for example, in the United States, you would have to get licensed in every state separately. And this can be a very time-consuming and tricky thing. So in one hand, it's bringing Europe a little bit closer together in this regulation.
And I'm trying to also kind of imagine these poor compliance teams sitting in a room somewhere trying to figure out how are we going to make sure it's unequivocal consent. You know, like these are kind of words where it's like unequivocal. How do you say it's unequivocal? Does that mean that transparency has to be higher, or does it mean you have to use easier words or less fine print, bigger type? I don't know. Like what are the tactics that you're looking at, or what are the things that are changing? I know there's like a huge question. I'm sorry.
Looks at me.
Or one example, maybe. One example.
This part is not defined, so I try not to steer this into a GDPR discussion the whole time. But
no,
it's not defined in a way that it tells you it needs to exactly look like this, and this is the template. it tells you it needs to be transparent, it needs to be clear, the data that's going to be used needs to be understandably explained, which basically tells us that you can't, or tells everybody that's dealing with this, you can't hide it in some terms and conditions that are hidden somewhere else. So it needs to be displayed clearly for the clients. The second thing is also, I think that these fines and the deterrents, they're not going to be something that's going to be applied to the small players. You can't take 20 million euro or 4% of global turnover from some small company that maybe didn't know that this was the regulation. So there's probably going to be some gray zone. But the main part that's going to stay and that they're going to try to enforce is, first, you have the right to revoke any access. So any data that you've given, you need to be able to revoke it, and you have the right to get all the data for yourself. So we need to be clear that if we misuse any data, if we misuse the trust of customers and the services that we provide, so the chatbots or whatever, it turns out that they're not happy with what we're providing, or they're not happy with the way that we use the data, they're going to be able to take that back, and I think that's a completely understandable thing. My problem is much before GDPR. It's how do you even get a framework in the environment that we have now and the platforms that we want to integrate into, to be able to comply minimally with some of the requirements.
That actually leads me to the next question, which is, certain messaging platforms have a business model that sells user data to advertisers. What kind of instruments, legal or otherwise, are you looking at to integrate into those kind of messaging services? Is that a problem or a challenge, or maybe for instance with ERGO? I'm not sure if you're using messengers platforms like that.
Yeah, first of all, we are definitely not allowed to sell any data, and
Pardon?
we are not selling any data or something like that.
So, of course, no.
I
did not want to imply that.
Yeah, of course. The customer is, for example, moving to Facebook, and I want to deliver a service in Facebook, and then I'm going to my really friend from data privacy, and he is already seeing the red signs in his head and waving the red flag. No, it's not possible. And then we need to iterate until we find a consensus that he's keeping his job and he's fulfilling the requirements, and I can still offer a service that is not fully destroyed with conversion rate. And until now, we were able, I don't know, to use WebView, for example, if it's a bit more difficult, or if it's like easy cases where it's not some data privacy related, then we are allowed to use it. So, and somehow it depends.
Can you briefly walk us through how the bot of ERGO works? Like what can I as a user expect if I try to start using the bot?
The current bot, it's implemented on our webpage, so it's not used any other channels right now, but we are thinking about using it in the future. However, we decided to use a channel that has the most traffic right now, which is our webpage. And other channels might be the telephone or also email. It's like all the channels, but they have massive traffic. And if we're thinking about our business impact, we also need to think about these channels. And if I have a look on Facebook, it's, I don't know, we receive maybe 1 to 5 messages a week during Facebook Messenger, and on the webpage is like a daily amount of people reaching out to us. So that's why we choose the other ones. And currently, the chatbot works as a suggestion machine for our agents. For mainly 2 reasons. So one is the reputation risk. Last year, ERGO Direct especially has been, got the award for best customer service in Germany for Apple and stuff. So they were quite suspicious about giving a bot the freedom of talking to customers. So that's why they have their hand above it. And we can really use it also to train our bot to make it better, because if the customer writes a message, the message pops up for the agent and he just clicks send, and then the bot is getting the feedback that it was the correct message, the correct answer, the correct suggestion, And what we see over weeks is that it's improving, that it's getting better, and that's what we are hoping. And until we reach a level with a certain confidence level, then we will open it and really communicate that that he's only talking to a bot and not to an agent anymore. So that was our approach, and the use cases are changing addresses, changing banking details, asking when do I get my money, stuff like this. How do I can insert an invoice, stuff like this.
Okay. And how is it actually working in TransferWise? Like, what can I expect as user there?
Right, so the current TransferWise bot does one main thing, and that's basically exchange rate alerts. We also used to offer creating transfers in there, just as a test. But we find that it's not maybe the best platform for that, and that it's better to use some kind of a related solution rather than your main company's product inside that bot. So you can get daily rate alerts, similar to Poncho.
Okay. And with your bot, like, can you walk us through like what I can expect as a user?
Sure. So you raised a very interesting point. Yes.
Because the image,
yeah,
right?
Sorry.
Because I really think it's a good thing, yeah.
The work that we're trying to do is on a stages basis with our current portfolio of clients. The idea is to not go head down to Facebook Messenger without even knowing how to chat to the audience. So relying on the organic traffic is the right approach for us. So web-based solution as a first scenario. And on our side, we're still trying to prove the economic model of a chatbot and proving it very quickly. So the idea for us is to work on an onboarding new client type of scenario. Being able to help the client selecting the right product, be guided through a conversation to have access to the service he wants in a very short amount of time. So our two first clients are two major insurers in South Africa, and the idea is to provide a quote in a very short amount of time. Usually, even in France, we've done some tests, and to have access to a proper quote that is accurate, you need to spend roughly between 30 to 40 minutes on a phone with a call center. With this solution, the first test after a month of activity was less than 13 minutes. So we save a huge amount of time with a user experience that is much better than a call center where they don't really hear you, you have to repeat your name, and they don't really understand, and then the line cuts, and you have to start again the process.
Well, actually, I think that's a pretty interesting use case because you're actually tackling a channel, specifically like call centers, where every minute of calling is like pretty expensive.
Exactly.
So it actually makes sense to make this conversational based in some way and actually save time and resources.
And the idea is not working against the call center, but with the call center and providing a much better quality of leads by filtering with the conversation. And on one of our scenarios, we've plugged two different call centers on the back end in order to redirect the lead to the right team that can manage that very quickly. In order always to provide the best user experience and reduce the time spent on a call center and increase the conversion rate, indeed. Okay. So that's our first approach in order to bring data to the industry, saying, guys, we've increased the conversion rate of 3 points, we've reduced your time of call center spend by 10 minutes. That's data in a COMEX that you can easily prove and say, okay, guys, let's invest more into that technology, into other platforms such as Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp very soon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to maybe underline one comment you made is like not working against the call center, but with the call center, and I totally agree. It was the same approach that we did. So we asked the agents, So of course we had data, but also we asked what are the main cases, what is annoying you, where do you need support, and that's the cases we tackled that they wanted to be solved, and that's why the acceptance rate from the agents is good. And I think that's a correct approach also to combine the agents with the bot. And we saw this nice picture with the heart, and that's I think an example for it.
I think the audience is still doesn't really know if they want to share their banking details into a chat conversation. Sharing their credit card credentials is still very sensitive data. They're starting to get used to doing that on e-commerce, But through chatbot, it's completely new. So we're using the call center to do that, a human intervention to proofread the credentials, making sure that the people understood the product they're about to subscribe. I think it's the best way to making sure that this technology works fine.
Yeah, when you're working with automated customer support agents, I think it's very important to take this approach that ERGO has taken, where you don't immediately take this bot you've built and surface it to customers, as quite often this experience isn't as good as it could be. So this agent approval and learning from that is very important, I think.
Mm.
I'm curious because you were mentioning the fact that people can ask for a quote, and these kind of things are already a bit sensitive, perhaps, because it is relating to how much something costs or how much somebody can pay for something. Is there a difference? I'm thinking now about BeeOne and ERGO and TransferWise actually compared to a smaller company like yours, where it's a much bigger infrastructure that you're working with. Is it harder to be flexible that way and be able to just try something out like that and see if people receive it well? I mean, what are your experiences there? Have you had a huge challenge getting over a certain hurdle besides bank details? I mean, any one of you.
So with TransferWise, even though we've grown a lot in the recent years, we still consider ourselves very much a startup. And that comes out in the form of these autonomous teams. So everyone in TransferWise works in a tiny, almost like a startup within a startup, which means everyone has a lot of creative freedom. Of course, we're a financial institution. We have to run all this by compliance and all of the KYC requirements, but I wouldn't say it's been a hurdle to try things out.
Okay.
For example, sorry, you want to?
Feel free.
Okay. I think we have a kind of good example because ERGO founded a fully digital insurer called Nexible, and we have much more freedom with Nexible to test new things out.
Is it a separate company? No.
Yeah, it's a separate company.
It is separate.
And it has a completely different branding and serves, it's digital only, so it serves also another type of customer. And we will be able to, we will use the chatbot for much more cases in the beginning for Nexible than for ERGO, because ERGO has that kind of reputation risk. And think about what we learned in the Poncho session. It's a lot about character and building up the branding of ERGO into that character that needs to work. It's a lot more work, and with the startup, not so much to lose, and we will be have more freedom to test things out.
In our case, I think that it's quite simple because we are set up as BeeOne as a separate company and given the mandate to do exactly that. But you need to distinguish two things. One is we have the mandate and we're not scared to experiment. So we've had a number of apps in the market, so mobile apps that we killed at one point because we just said, listen, we don't think that we have the focus because we had so many other things we were dealing with that we could continue developing this in the way that it deserves to be developed. So we did a nice closing down, thanked all the users, sent them a nice farewell mail, and said there's other players that are doing better stuff. So the willingness to fail is on our side. With chatbots, it's just another thing in terms of the willingness to do something is there. We have a number of prototypes that we've launched. We have some things in the market a bit low key. So in Austria, we have a chatbot that helps you out with the process of inquiring around a loan. In Romania, we have a bot that helps you with the process of financing a car. But that's kind of the starting points. But in general, if we want to talk about the other use cases that are let's say the harder, or somebody would say the more interesting ones, of connecting your bank account, being able to ask, hey George, what is my balance? How am I doing, George? And we get a contextual response. These are things that we have to solve, and we have to put a special magnifying glass on the security aspect. And even though we're a separate company, and given the mandate to experiment, and even though we have George, which is our new online banking, which has a brand that is more accepting of this kind of new style, get something done, try and iterate, it's still in the background, it's your financials, and we can't compromise on trust. So I think that there's a line to which you can go, and that line is, are you compromising the security of the clients and the trust that you have? And that's something that, whether you're a small company or a large company, you probably will look at more carefully, and especially if you're a large company, just because you have such a brand, and especially talking about Erste, which is a 200-year-old bank, so this trust has been built for a while. And also, on the other flip side, you're much more of a magnet. So in our usability testing, because we've done a number of tests with different prototypes of chatbots, and when we asked a specific question of would you be willing to use this, and we asked them kind of in the direction, would you limit it to publicly accessible stuff? Would you want to have the full service and doing this whole flow? Everybody said, well, we want to do everything. And when we asked them, well, would you sign off on kind of a theoretical disclaimer saying, I'm okay with somebody else being able to maybe listen in on finding out some of my financials and so on? They said, well, at the end, if you put the logo of George or the bank on it, we don't care, it's your job. So that's the part of, yes, people want it, they want you to take care of everything, but if it goes badly, they're going to get back, and if you're larger, you're a bigger target.
Okay, you said something also briefly there with, you can try things out and you can be more flexible. Also, just with natural, you briefly said about natural language, just speaking, saying what's my bank balance, things like this. How far down the line is that for Insurtech, FinTech? I haven't heard of any instances in which the natural language is already used in an AI. Maybe I'm not up to date. But
the way of speaking or the fact of speaking?
The fact.
So there is stuff. We have a lot of prototypes that are working. That's just, and I think it's a very interesting area, especially just whoever has started using Google Home or Amazon Echo at home. You can see how quickly you get used to it. It's such a natural switch that I find myself discussing with people, and they say, "Yeah, it's a bit still. You'll see, it's going to take time." I just tell them, put it in your home for a few days, and you'll see. I think that as far as the customer value, the experience, everything, it's there. There are some banks, like Capital One in the US has done this, but as we said at the beginning, as Antoine said, the regulation in the US is lower, and the way that they implemented it, I'm not sure I would really do it that way. So what they do is they have a 4-digit static PIN. So if somebody comes into your house, you can have it without that. Somebody says, hey, what is my balance? Anybody can hear it. That's actually, for me, less of a worry. The worry is a bit more on the security side. There's a number of aspects that are quite questionable in there, but it all ends up with where are you going to draw the border of which risk you want to take. In Europe, everybody is first much more regulated, much more conscious about data privacy and security. In the US, they have a bit more flexibility on that, but at the end, it's their decision. Will they do that or not? And second, the customers, do they understand that they are okay with that or not?
I think we still have a lot of time in the tech space to then go through the voice recognition. Providing the best user experience, to me, is to guide the user. I don't believe yet in NLP, especially for financial services, because I think everyone wants to have a quick answer of a specific subject. So guiding the user through a click-to-action kind of button is, to me, the way to go in a short run in order to prove the economic model of a chatbot. And to answer the question just before about the testing phase, what is very interesting is that even big corporate that works with startup can be flexible to test something that can be a low risk for them. So, for example, our first integration was the end goal is to replace the call me back form. So on an insurance website, you have call me back form. And the way we've implemented the first chatbot is the person still fills in that form, but after clicking on call me back, the bot opens and say, hey, I heard you wanted to be called back. Would you rather chat to me and have the same level of information, but in a much short amount of time? And the feedback and the conversion and the interaction with the bot are really good. So it's a low risk for the insurer and can prove very quickly this kind of economic model.
So it's just a question of deciding where to draw the line between
exactly.
what's compliant and what's not. Fantastic. I mean, we have actually a pretty geographically diverse panel here too, so I think that's also something valuable we should sink into real quick. What can you guys maybe say about your experiences in your maybe initial markets that you've tried and then markets you've expanded to? I know that with BeeOne it's been kind of a Central European effort. ERGO I know is also throughout the DACH region as far as I know.
Internationally.
Yeah, international as well, but I think the biggest in the DACH region.
Yeah.
TransferWise, obviously international, and you've also been in different countries. Maybe initial surprises or something that was.
So yeah, sorry. The very good first feedback that we have is that we heard that this industry, financial service provider, are mainly traditional and they don't want to innovate. I think it's an industry that innovates quite a lot, and they are willing to try new things. So from the first discussion that we had and the first statistics that we had from our first pilot, they are willing to discuss creating specific products for the chatbot. Because of in South Africa, yeah. But it's a big group from they operate in all Africa and they have branches in Europe as well. But the idea of replicate the traditional product is there already. They're doing it. But now they want to maybe simplify the conversation. Instead of having 50 questions, only have 15 questions and being able to insure the person in a very short amount of time. So they are even willing to try new things, creating new product dedicated to this medium or channel.
And is that a different experience that you have had in Europe?
Not yet, unfortunately.
You haven't had that experience yet. Okay.
Not yet.
Well, hard to compare then, obviously. Yes. What about for you, TransferWise?
So something that's been very interesting for me personally is how different countries across the world look at financial trust and financial systems quite differently. For example, in the US, there is this system called ACH, where if you want to pay using your bank at a website, what you do quite often is you log in with your bank details on that website, not on the bank, but you provide your login details to the website itself. Whereas if you propose that to a German customer, they would send you out of the door immediately. So it's kind of these local payment systems can be very weird and seem, for lack of a better word, insane sometimes. But
how different they are, or
how different they are, and how many of them are there. So there's lots of little payment systems that countries in Europe use only in that country, and they use nothing else, which is very interesting to work around.
And I think that's one of the things actually what makes WeChat so big, right? I mean, we have just one single market with literally hundreds of millions of users, like having one common payment system, whereas outside, I mean, even for WeChat, it's hard to grasp to get more ground, because if you look at Europe, it's like shattered. Like every country has its own thing. Like in terms of regulations, although EU is like putting this umbrella on it, but I mean, still, it comes to different countries, different payment systems you have to eventually deal with. That makes it more complicated then.
Yeah.
But also, like, just taking into account the technology in this aspect of, so in the chat, in the conversational part, in terms of text, it's a little bit easier. If you do guided conversations, you can build an experience. But we had the whole talk of, okay, how it's the same tone. There's so many different types of people and nationalities and so on that have different reactions to different types of tones. So if you're trying to build something, you have to take that into account also, different countries. Then if you want to do NLP, the amount of how you can train in different languages, what you can provide in Slovak and Czech, the libraries are of course not as good as in English or in German. Then to take it to the part of the voice stuff, German, yes, French, yes, English, yes, but if you're a Romanian, Slovak, Czech that we're trying to cover, it's going to be odd for you sitting at home and discussing with your home device in English. And the language skills of these devices, whether they will come and when they will come in Slovak and Croatian and the other languages is, it's a question when that will get to that level. So there's all these, it's one part of what we want to do, it's another part of what is the availabilities of the state of the tech that we want to use.
Interesting. Did you want to add to that? About regional stuff? No?
We just have for the chatbot experience, it's mainly in Germany. We have one that's really successful in India, but I'm not so well. I don't know so much about the Indian chatbot. But I know it's working well and they enhance it and they tackle really a huge amount of customer service as well. But probably as well because the people in India are more used to mobile conversations and stuff. So it's helping the trend.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think where we have a lot of work and it's very interesting is exactly what you were saying, the tone of the conversation, being able to know how to chat to the audience, how to introduce a specific product, the phrasing of the question, making sure that the question has been understood. All those fields for me are where our company FinChatBot is working in order to really provide the best user experience, being really customer-centric and thinking of what is the goal and how to get to that goal in a very short amount of time.
I think it's also the responsibility of the tech providers.
Exactly.
For example, we had a discussion with Google for Google Home in UK, and they said, okay, if you start developing the skill for Google Home in UK, you can't directly transfer it easily to German because it will be slightly different, and they, to that point, didn't know how and what kind different. So we said, okay, for us, we don't need to go to UK now, doing the skill, and then come back to Germany and do it for a whole again. Doesn't make any sense. So it's also the responsibility of the tech providers to make sure that you can easily transfer it maybe throughout the regions.
Just because we're seeing a couple of these questions here now, maybe we want to look into some of them. There's one that's gotten the most votes here. Isn't digital chat or assistant capability of a bank rather a traffic or usage driver for existing banking apps than a replacer, at least in the short term? Well, let's ask I mean, I'm if I've understood this correctly, we're talking about
kind of an acquisition channel, right? So,
pardon?
So like kind of an acquisition channel for to guide users to an existing channel.
I would say that it's the easy answer is probably yes, but the fact is that so you have to define what are the use cases that there's more value or there's some additional value that a chatbot could bring. Of course, the basic things of if you want to just use it for what is my balance, what are my last transactions, you can do this on a variety of different channels. It's your choice then whether you want to do it on a chatbot or go into an app or ask your home device or whatever. Some use cases that are inherently social, I think that makes sense more for chatbot to leverage the fact that if I want to interact with my friends financially, that is something that the social networks are based on. So that is something that they bring more value to. Or what we said before, having an experience of having a conversation, having a tone, that's something that's different from the graphical user interfaces. And every customer will find which use case is the one that solves which channel is the one that solves their use case best. And for sure, there are some use cases that a chat can have some more value. So, as I said before, like kind of this question of asking somebody things that you would ask your advisor, like, George, how am I doing? Is a very abstract question that can lead to a conversation of saying, okay, what is good, what is bad, how could you improve, and so on. And that's something that is kind of bringing a human factor into this digital world.
I sort of agree, but also disagree on a point. I think that discovery mechanisms currently for chatbots are not effective enough yet. So it doesn't really function purely as an acquisition channel, if you think about it that way. But one way it can function as an acquisition channel is if you don't try to port your existing product into a chatbot, but build another product that solves another problem and tie that into your own product through that chatbot. I think the main thing you really have to do is actually solve a customer problem and not really try to cram an existing solution in there.
We heard before in a couple of the talks that, empathy is key, right? So it doesn't change just because it's fintech or insurance. People still have needs, and you still have to think about your users' needs, absolutely. Let's look at some of these other questions, unless somebody has a pressing answer to that one. Okay. Should banks have chatbots on messaging platforms? What features should they deploy?
Plateau forms.
Pardon?
Plateau forms.
Yes, those are Plato forms. They're actually philosophical forms.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, yes. But I think platforms was the intention. Maybe. That's a whole new kettle of compliance fish. Am I right? Or am I wrong? I don't know.
Yes. No, so that's the main question. I think that, I repeat this a number of times. There's the easy thing is to do stuff, just expose publicly accessible information. I think that that's very short term, and you're not going to be able to provide a lot more value. To be able to provide more kind of custom, being able to ask questions about me, being able to help me with my financial day-to-day, you need to solve some of the, or we still need to find the best solutions for some of the security parts. Other than that, what features should they deploy? There's also the possibility of finding just niche use cases. So like I said, some of the social use cases that social platforms are based on.
What would a social use case be? Like a group birthday present, or what are we talking about
exactly,
here?
stuff like that. So, I need to send money from person A to person B. It's easier to, or a group of people, or bill
splitting bills. Yeah,
exactly.
like that.
So this type of stuff is social by nature, and it's the fact that it's a financial use case is just an additional part of the social aspect.
Any other ideas for use cases? Just while we're out there? Okay. Then Joe asked the question, regulations are a legal thing, but what do you think about user fear or not being used to sharing such sensitive data? Well, we've kind of been talking about this the whole time. I think this doesn't really, is there anything we have to add on that level? I think, I think the next question is actually also kind of interesting. So millennials think banking is boring and difficult. Can chatbots save us?
From going bankrupt. Yes, I think the fun dimension of a chatbot is a way to talk to millennials, and giving access to being embedded into their favorite apps makes huge sense when you spend most of your time on your smartphone, on WhatsApp, on Messenger. Integrating the business perspective makes totally sense. When you hear that 1 billion messages are sent every month on Messenger to businesses, and it's maybe not chatbot, it can be like just I'm chatting to a brand through Messenger, but automating maybe 80% of the requests make a huge sense, because you can provide a much better service while having a nice and fun experience.
Any other ideas there? No? Okay. Bankruptcy, not a thing, not going to happen. It's been people always talk about the gamification aspect. Is playing with your money a way to become more financially aware, or is that just something that's a nice extra?
No.
What do you guys think in your experience?
The buzzword of 2011 or something like
Gamification?
that.
Yeah.
I think that the idea is not to force people to play with their money more. I think going back to people have basic needs. Money is a need that you need to have solved, and the game should be how can we solve that need in a less of an intrusive way. Solve it, be in the background, and have some logic, and be the smart one to tell people, hey, there's something that's happening, you should intervene. And that's kind of, that's our mantra. We started this story about George by saying we want to be the autopilot for your finances. And I think that's going less into the direction of forcing you to play with it and more into, we're going to take care of this stuff, be in the background, and let you know when there's something happening. And whether a chatbot is an interface that can help you with that, for sure. But there's also other aspects to that.
Fantastic.
Just wanted to add something,
because very concise.
Very
Fantastic.
quickly. Okay, sorry. Financial inclusion on my part is a big deal, because in Africa and in South Africa you have a very little portion of the population that is insured, and giving access to financial service through a messaging app that is heavily used makes a huge sense. And to give you a stat, in South Africa, only 40% of the population is insured in terms of car insurance. So letting access to this in a much easier way, quicker way, is as well a good answer to insure more and better.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, yes, no, absolutely. I just want to say a big thank you to the panel. I think this is a really fascinating subject that's going to be changing over the next few years, probably drastically. You guys will be very busy, especially come May next year. So I wish you guys lots of power and strength. And yeah, big round of applause for our panel, please.
Thank you.